Welcome back. In this session, we are discussing about exception handling. What is an exception handling? This is a structured handling of error that leads the application from abnormal termination. This will improve the time of execution of the program. Let us first see the following situation to understand the exception handling here. If you notice, in this scenario, fielder trying to catch the ball, unfortunately he missed it and he fell down. Now he is throwing the ball to another fielder where the person catches. The theme of these two fielders are to make the batsman out, where they failed in doing this. Let us see one more the example. Here in this, passenger going behind the bus to run and catch it, but the person failed to catch the bus. This is again where we can see as a part of exception. In both the cases, the failure is a reason of exception. Now the approach is to prevent it from abnormal termination. To understand it more clearly, let us first think about the programming approach with keywords of exception. Exception and error are two classes. Error is the class sometimes we might encounter situation from which we cannot recover, like out of memory is one situation. These are considered as errors. Exception is used when a problem encounters and expected to execute the program, but unexpected termination or fault occurred is called an exception. When we try and divide a number by 0 as a denominator, this causes abnormal termination of the program. Exception handling gives us another opportunity to recover it from abnormal termination. Now, let us understand the hierarchy of the classes in the exception. Throwable is a superclass of all exceptions and errors, as we can find from this following picture that shows the clear picture of hierarchy of the classes. In this, where throwable is a root class for error and exception, where we can find the subdivision of the classes which are identified as a part of exception classes. Keywords used for exception. Try is a block that has collection of statements that performs general activity of the program. By chance, any of the line interrupted or failed will be handled by the catch, which is another block. Throw keyword is used for intentional termination of the program. Throws is used to declare a function along with the type or list of exceptions that may occur when the function is being called. Finally is another keyword that helps us in identifying finalization of the system, whether the application is successful or unsuccessful. This leads to smart conclusion of the application. Categories of exception: checked and unchecked. Checked exception is always source dependent unless and until the resource is not mapped. This will cause a compile time exception. Unchecked exception is a logical dependent. This is identified only at the runtime of the program. Let us find two examples of checked and unchecked behavior. Here in this program, we are discussing about the way of approach for checked exception. I would like to take two input values as integer, which is getting converted or parsed from the scanner input. Now my condition is to cross check the input value as a divided by b, nothing but numerator is divided by denominator. Denominator should not be 0. In case of 0, it will raise an exception as denominator cannot be greater than numerator. Now here, by the same time, it is handling two exceptions, that is arithmetic exception for denominator value and number format exception for the input type what we expect is not reached. So here with this, where we can find our execution process. As we compile the program, we can find the output of it. It is waiting for the input value. First I will enter some number 12 and denominator as say 3, where I do get the output of it. Let us try with one more the execution. I will take the numerator value as say again 12 and denominator as 0, where it raises an exception called as an arithmetic exception where denominator cannot be 0. We will try with one more input. I will take the numerator as any number, denominator with any floating value, where you can find number format exception where the input is not expected a floating value which is required to be integer is violating the condition. This is where we can find the type of exception which is caused by our application. Now let us check with the approach of checked exception. Now here in this, where I write my application as validate user, and in my class my input parameter is username and the function that registers that throws the exception called as an superclass of exception. And now this exception is reported to the caller. Now internally we will verify the length of the given name. If the length of the name is less than 5, then it raises an exception with the keyword throw as a runtime exception and identifying the message as expected length is 5. Now how do we test whether the exception is checked or unchecked in the behavior? First of all, I will avoid the try catch block just for our confirmation sake. I'll comment it. So soon I comment my block. You can notice that line number 16 is showing some kind of error, and as I position the mouse over there, it is saying that unreported exception. It means that it has to be caught either by throws or try catch. Now I enable the block. So whenever the exception is checked, it will ensure that your program is either using try catch block or throws to report the exception to the caller or to JVM. As long the exception is not registered for reporting, it will never compile your program successfully. This is where we can see with the checked behavior.